All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Should Educators Be Using AI? Addressing Ethics as we explore AI assistance. My name is Anwar Hijaz, and I'm a political science faculty at Saddleback College and a faculty mentor at CVC at One. We're really looking forward to today's webinar, and I am pleased to introduce you all our wonderful facilitator, Anna Mills. Anna has taught writing in California community colleges for over 20 years and is the author of Open Educational Resource Textbook, How Arguments Work, a guide to writing and analyzing texts in college. Before the release of ChatGPT, she started a popular resource list on AI in higher education, hosted by the Writing Across the Curriculum Clearinghouse. Her essays on AI appear in the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed, and she serves on the Modern Language Association Conference on College Composition and Communication Task Force on Writing and AI, and is a faculty for the American Association of Colleges and Universities Institute on AI, Pedagogy, and Curriculum. So before we get started, I wanted to provide you all with some information about the webinar. And during the webinar, we will be sharing out a survey for all of your feedback. And we love to get feedback from you all so we can continue to be improving on our webinars at One. So we really appreciate if you can complete the survey. We will be sharing it at the 30-minute mark and then following that every 15 minutes. Lastly, At One provides badges for course completions, but we do not offer badges for attending this webinar. If your institution requires proof of attendance for flex credit or professional development, we recommend you stay till the end of the webinar, complete the survey, and request a copy of your responses via the Google form. This can serve as your confirmation. I will go ahead and pass it on to Anna. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. I am excited and I have a little bit of trepidation about this topic, but I felt it was so important. And I hear from so many educators who are concerned about AI ethics. And I wanted to have a workshop as a space for me to share what I've learned, what I'm doing, what I'm thinking in a very straightforward way, and to open it up and hope that that's helpful to you in your explorations of the ethics and your own choices around AI and how you guide your students. I think for some reason my Q&A is not showing up for me, and I think that, given this size, it'll work to use the chat. So it's awesome that people are introducing themselves in the chat. I hope that keeps up. Welcome, everyone. It's cool to see all the different colleges and universities represented. So if you have questions as this goes, comments, please put them in the chat. And I will try to notice that as I go, but definitely pause at the end of each section to look at that. So this is a really big topic, AI ethics. Many dissertations have been written on it. And I'm not going to give a dissertation. What I'm going to do is just kind of frame it in terms of my general approach and my case for actually using AI, despite some significant ethical concerns that are not easy to resolve. But sharing this approach of sort of very practically saying, let's build our own AI literacy by exploring how we might use it for teaching assistance. And as we do that, let's try to reduce the harms, think about the harms, and maybe share with students what we're doing on this ethical front. So I'm going to tell you about that approach and then kind of look at specific things that I do or that I know of to do about each of the different types of concerns that people raise. And I'm going to invite you to contribute to that, set of ideas. You can, in addition to the chat, you can comment on this slide deck that Anwar has just put back in the chat. So you can use the Google Slides, select something and just comment on it, and it would be great to have your voice alongside it there. Okay. So, my case for, why I'm continuing to use AI, even though I know there are a lot of problems with it. Um, so actually, before I give my case, if you would be willing to do a little word cloud, I'll put this little Mentimeter poll link in the chat. And it just asks you for what are you associated, what are you coming in with, thinking about? What feelings, ideas, concepts, concerns come to mind when you think of AI ethics? So you can also use the QR code if you'd rather. Um, and hopefully that link, let's see, let me put the link in the chat again. Um, and I am going to bring up that. Ooh, awesome. People are doing it. Interesting. Messy. Yes, I feel that it's messy too. Overwhelming. Yes. I'm welcoming all these emotions, negative, positive, hopeful, fearful. We have to acknowledge them, I think. Concern. Yeah. Difficult, unclear. Um, I just appreciate you folks showing up for this workshop to engage with this. It is a lot. Okay. Plagiarism. Uh-huh. Trepidation. Let's see. Unclear. Yeah. Difficult, challenging, concern, needed. As far as specific issues, I saw environment, I saw transparency and the plagiarism, equity. Um, Interesting. Oxymoron. Okay, so yeah. You might feel that there is no ethical AI, and that's certainly a defensible position that I respect. Um, Learning curve. So this is really fascinating and helpful. That's interesting. Curiosity. I think that will help us if we can approach it with curiosity, in addition to all these other feelings that might come up. Um, cool, interesting. Ooh, Frankenstein. That's a warning, right? Um, the story of Frankenstein is not a comedy. It's a tragedy. Um, Okay. Futile, fraud. Okay, so yeah, I just welcome all of these perspectives and feelings. And maybe they will come out in the comments as well. I imagine they will. And I'm sure I won't be able to address everything, but hopefully this is a space where you will build on what you're thinking and feel less alone with it. Um, So I do want to acknowledge um, that there are these concerns that I'm going to talk very briefly about each and what we might do in this workshop. And I have a couple of experiments, so it is interactive, things for you to try that also relate to teaching assistants. Um, so things like energy and water use, intellectual property concerns, both about the training of AI systems and about what they produce, and whether that violates copyright. Inaccuracy and how that might undermine a respect for truth. Hallucinations, I'm talking about. Bias in AI systems, that's been heavily documented. Maybe a little less well known is sort of possible unfair or abusive labor practices with data workers, humans whose work is necessary to create these AI systems. Privacy and data rights around users of AI and the things that we tell it or give it, what happens with those. And then kind of, I was debating how to put this, but I sort of think of it as the erosion of trust if we have dishonest or non-transparent use of AI, when we don't know what's AI and what's not. So I'm going to peek in the chat. Okay, awesome. People are still coming in and introducing. That's great. And so I'm really not going to offer I don't see an immediate solution to any of these. I'm not I have seen workshops that sort of say, okay, we're going to teach you the ethical way to use AI. And I think the implication there is then you don't have to worry about any of this and you don't have to feel bad because there is an ethical way. And once you get that, that formula, you're good. Um, I don't actually think that's true. And I think that, in some ways, like, let's just acknowledge this burden of being honest about it. There's not a perfect way. These systems are built the way that they were built. That's not easy to change. Um, and as teachers, we have even an additional responsibility, because our decisions about using it, not using it, how we talk about it affect our students. On one hand, maybe they would miss out if we don't teach them about it, how to use it. Maybe that would increase equity gaps. But maybe we would then be recommending something that's not ethical. So we're in this kind of bind. I've talked to many educators who feel that tension. Um, and they may feel that students need their guidance. They need to learn how to use it because they'll need to use it in the workplace. And that we need to understand as teachers how it can be useful in order to share that with students. Um, so, and that's the case that I feel myself that in order to give guidance around this, we do need some like emotional understanding that it can be useful. We need to have experienced that and have experienced some of the ways it might be used, beyond just, phoning it in, range of ways that it might be used in a process that we still control. Um, so yeah, so there is a case for that AI literacy, but then there's this weight of responsibility for the ethical concerns. So what do we do? Um, I Tough, right? And as let's see, Ralph is saying in the chat, our students are using it, so we need to keep up with them. Yeah, I think that's kind of resonates with with the similar argument. And Yeah, I appreciate all the comments in the chat. And I just want to say up front that one very obvious and I think, principled stance that, again, people I respect have taken and are taking is to just say, if there are all these concerns with AI and I don't think they can be fully resolved, maybe we should just not use it and not recommend it to students, not invite them to use it. Or maybe we should teach them about it, but mainly teach them the harms and why not to use it. Um, and so there's a group in my discipline in writing studies that has started a WordPress site on refusing generative AI. And this includes the president of my professional organization, the College Conference on Composition and Communication, or I think she's the executive director. And they share very well informed materials on how to teach students about it without necessarily inviting them to use it, um, sort of refusing it when and where they're able to do so. Um, so it's kind of the conscientious objector stance. And they say they want to opt out until these products are better aligned with our values. And I do encourage you to check out that website. They have a podcast. Um, but as I've said, that isn't where I am. Um, I will say that I grew up in Silicon Valley. I find this technology compelling, fascinating, powerful. It feels more like the internet to me than like something like MOOCs or the metaverse that fizzled a little bit. Um, it feels like, as people are saying in the chat, it's not going away. And to participate fully in society, we need to know about it, including how we could use it and have some experience of that. So that is where I'm coming from. But I do have that part of me that wonders, well, to what extent am I justifying this because I do really want to use it? And I do think it's amazing, and despite its flaws. So I feel like I need to admit that. Um, the website, yeah, is in the slide deck. Let me go back and grab that for you. It has a lot of good resources. Um, so it was interesting because I was just at our conference in Baltimore for writing studies and composition, and Jennifer Sano Francini, who's listed there, gave the address, and it was all about refusing AI. It was a really impassioned speech about resistance, and there was a warm response to that. But at the same time, I would say, of the many, many workshops on AI, a vast majority, like, I don't know, 19 of every 20 or 9 out of 10 of those workshops were about teachers who are inviting students to use it, even if they have a somewhat critical perspective. And they're trying to balance those things, even as they do invite students to use it in some particular way. Um, so I did just want to validate that, having these concerns does not mean somebody has their head in the sand, or that they're against progress, or that they are, right, like, just unwilling to engage. Um, there are, there are real concerns, and there are reasons for that stance. Um, but I don't see very many people taking it. And I think it was telling at my conference that most of those workshops, and it was very competitive to get your proposal accepted. Most of those proposals that were accepted were about, it's here. We want to engage with it. We want to guide students on its use, even as we teach them about these harms. And so that's kind of the approach that I'm taking. Continuing to ask, does it work? Is there a way? What are the best ways to use it? Um, Even as we maybe can do something to think about the ethics and address the ethics. Um, and of course, like, there's only so much we can do as an individual. So maybe there are certain things we can do as individual teachers, or that they can do as individuals, using the systems. But there's also this larger level of collective action. What can we do as citizens in a society together to reduce these harms? Um, so I'm saying, let's use it critically, understand what it can do, but constantly be looking at harms and how to reduce them, and talking with students about that. That's essentially my approach. And people are sharing really, really cool, just short approaches that you've used, um, opinions. It's really awesome, lively chat. I'll have to read it more closely later. Um, so, to back this up, I found it really validating that the UN, it's the UN UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. I didn't know that's what it stood for until yesterday. They published this AI competency framework for students in 2024. And the goal there is not just like, let's just use AI, or like, let's just help students use it. It's to prepare students to be responsible and creative citizens in the era of AI. Has a vision of students as AI co-creators and responsible citizens. So there's this sense of like, AI literacy, AI competency is about engaging with these issues and thinking that we might have some effect on them going forward. Either through group advocacy or through how we use them. And I think that's a really helpful vision that they've put out. And you can look at their whole framework that goes into more detail about elements of AI literacy and competency, and how that how that plays out, but it includes a understanding of these harms and concerns, as well as like how to prompt the systems and design them and get the most out of them. Yeah, I appreciate that comment in the chat. Yeah, if we don't lead with integrity, neither will it. We're the ones teaching it, so it's on us to guide it, question it, um, and make sure it's being used with purpose. It's beautifully said. So I think I've pretty much covered this already, but this is my pragmatic approach. No clean conscience guarantee. It's a little more ambiguous, but it is inviting an open discussion. And I would say I'm not going to give a big lecture about the details of each of these harms, but I do have a lot of additional links in the slide deck. And feel free to add things that I've missed. These are incomplete discussions of a really rich topic. Yeah. So people are mentioning things like the academic integrity and lack of critical thinking. I have huge concerns about those kind of pedagogical impacts. But I haven't focused on that in this workshop. I do share slides for big slide deck on academic integrity and also teaching with AI to support critical thinking. So yeah, I hope those might be useful, but I'm glad people are bringing those things up. Okay, so energy and water use. This is one of the things that, for some people, this is just the non-starter, because it is widely accepted that these systems, that training them is more intensive energy-wise than traditional computing. Major companies have seen spikes in energy consumption in data centers. We know that, this contributes to climate change. There are a lot of different estimates as to how much and whether that's necessary, how much more efficient the systems can get. We did have recent developments with, more energy efficient training of models in China with DeepSeek recently released. So some people are looking to that, efficiency direction to get us out of this. And some people are hoping that generative AI will help us with energy, water, and climate. But we can't get around the fact that it does take quite a bit of energy to run these systems, and probably more than just search, or certainly more than just working on our laptop without the internet. They also use water, mostly, I think, to cool the servers in the data center. And there are different estimates of this that's hotly debated, but one UC Riverside researcher, Xiaolei Ren, estimates that even the older text generator that's not as doesn't consume as much needs a 16-ounce bottle of water for every 10 to 50 responses it makes. So there is a physical reality to these bots, and planetary impacts. And I was just in this kind of amazing discussion in the AI and Education Google group, where people were just sharing articles and information about how much of a climate impact is there, how much water is used, and really just trying to see it clearly together, including to look at questions about how that compares to other forms of energy use. And so I'm putting these links to both that group, where you can see the whole archived message list if you join. And this page, this is what sparked the discussion. John Ippolito, who runs the Learn with AI initiative at the University of Maine, he publishes this page on energy and water usage, where he's just sharing what he's learning and updating it constantly. And he updated it a whole bunch based on that listserv. So I'm going to share the surprising things that he found. And there's a big warning that says these are guesses based on incomplete and often contradictory sources. So this is not precise, but he does give his sources on the page, and he did revise it with lots of input. And it's just that, we might be concerned about AI energy use, but let's look also at all the kinds of energy use that are increasing, especially things like here we are on Zoom. I'm sorry to say, but the top of his list was a Zoom call with only 10 people. So, of course, we're not all using video, so it's a little bit less. But many things baked into our society today use large amounts of energy. And we need to think about that on a macro level. How do you bring that total amount down, um, rather than focusing only on AI? So video streaming, um, storing files in the cloud instead of on local devices, things that we've grown accustomed to, that I've grown accustomed to, as normal, are actually quite energy intensive, may often more so than even than a chatbot. Um, So you see at the bottom of this list is generating an image. And then I was trying to keep this short, but the chat bot generating text. Oh yeah, no, that's 30. Generating a page of text is 30 watt hours compared to, 200 for an hour streamed video. Um, so when we think about what could we actually do, um, there are a lot of immediate options. Um, and one would be never use AI, but another would be decision by decision, asking ourselves, what am I about to do? And is it worth the energy cost? Um, and saying yes a fair amount of the time if it's something that's really useful to us. Um, but if we ask that question about streaming video, about I'm storing my docs in Google Docs and not on my device primarily. I mean, this is a big set of questions. And so I think, the best I can do for the moment is to say, I'm going to ask myself that question more often. Um, is the benefit of this energy use worth it, including AI? And so that means for me that sometimes I don't do image generation. I haven't done any video generation because that's more energy intensive. Um, it's not that I would never do it, but I try to limit that use. Um, but on a macro scale, what can we do? We can at least bring this up with students or model that we're thinking about it, that it's part of our consciousness about the choice to use AI, um, and that many people are exploring ways to address it, and they might consider what they want to get behind. So just including it in AI literacy and in discussions of AI is an important step, I think. And I would love it if people want to add, yeah, and Sarah Harmon notes that, things like Google having AI overviews automatically, that automatically adds who knows how many millions of AI generations that users may not even want. So we can think about where is the power to adjust that, to affect that. Um, could we lobby these companies? And that's a question that's about social change in general, and power in society. That hopefully that those questions come up on a big scale in our classes, and this is one instance of them. Um, yeah, great. Using DuckDuckGo, which is a very good search engine, and turning off the auto AI feature. And I believe you can also turn it off in Google. Um, and I will try to find that link after the presentation to how to turn it off in Google. There is a way. It's a non-obvious way. Um, but Yeah, so, and Belinda is asking, so I think it's very well documented that storing on our devices uses less energy than storing in the cloud. Um, so that is one concrete thing that's pretty simple that we could do, right? Um, it's hard to think about going back to, we could also do DVDs instead of streaming media, right? But it's hard. Um, but on some level, that might be easier than not ever using AI. I don't know. Um, yeah, and I think that that's a great point that Sundar is making, that it might help to encourage AI companies to inform users of the cost of each interaction. So one of the things that John Ippolito of University of Maine found when he was trying to get this information about how much each thing energy it uses was that the companies were not at all transparent about it, and that they were sort of purposely choosing not to share that information. Oh, thank you so much. Sylvie knows how to not get the AI summary in Google search. Awesome. I want to put that into the slide deck later. Okay. Yeah, so I think that somebody already brought this up in the chat. But oh no, they didn't exactly. Some people are actually choosing to, run a chatbot on their own laptop, which is also good for privacy. Um, just so you're aware, that is one approach. I think at this point, it requires a little more technical savvy, or at least willingness to kind of play around. I haven't tried it, but my friend has. And maybe the chatbots that run on your laptop are not quite as good as you'd like at this point, according to this article, but they might get there. Um, and so yeah, please share. I think people have, but any other ideas you have on mitigating environmental harms, please do share. And feel free to comment on the slides. Okay, but I should move on because there's a lot of these. So let's see, other questions, comments. I think the detectors question is a big one, and I have included a slide deck at the end, a link to a slide deck where I talk about detectors and why I have very mixed feelings about them, but I am currently sort of using them a little bit after not using them at all. Yeah, tricky question. I use them non-punitively. I don't trust them, but that's another story. So, okay. So another concern that you might have heard, I know my son is 14 and he is an artist. He loves animation, and he is very concerned about AI and very mad, because it trains on artists' data. Anything people have put on the internet is fair game for AI to train on. As far as we know, they don't say exactly what they've trained it on, but you can see that if you ask these systems to create images, sometimes they will do it in a style that is so clearly derived from a particular artist or studio, and that's completely without that person's permission. They're not making any money on it. Their name is not on it. And so there are many people who argue that essentially by training on images and text from the internet that are copyrighted, that um, that these companies have violated copyright law, and that it's just unethical, that it's a form of stealing. We could say, as educators, we played a big role in the quality of all that text on the internet, right? That these models are trained on. So in a way, they are trained on top of our institutions and on top of our work. Um, and so how do we think about that? There are lawsuits going on. You may have heard that New York Times is suing OpenAI over this. And it just doesn't seem like they're going to shut the chatbots down, but who knows? there might be some significant ruling. So I think at least what we could do is to understand that discussions of the rights of creators, rights holders, writers should be part of discussion of AI. And we should be looking at where did this really come from? Where did this insight come from? And remembering that it comes from humans and that they didn't necessarily give permission and that the chatbot might not give them credit. Yes, thank you for sharing that content authenticity initiative link. I really admire that organization. So there are efforts to organize around this and do AI in a different way with consent from creators and copyright holders. So here's an example that I linked to with this screenshot that is asking for, artists and writers to be able to opt in rather than opting out, have the default be that if these systems are not training on their work, but they can opt in if they want to allow it. And maybe they could be compensated. That's another model. Now, you've probably heard about this sudden craze of people making memes on the internet that are in the style of Studio Ghibli. OpenAI sort of upgraded ChatGPT's image generation recently, and people found that they could ask for, their family portrait in Studio Ghibli style, and it looked kind of recognizable to that. And that has made, I have felt the temptation. I felt the temptation to put one of those images in the slide deck. And I chose not to because that was clearly a case where Hayao Miyazaki, the creator of Studio Ghibli, had already said that he considered AI art to be really horrifying to him, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so in that case, that is clearly his style that it's reproducing, and he clearly does not want that to happen. So, I can make a choice not to ask for Studio Ghibli style image, right? And that's something I could share with students. We could discuss with students if they're seeing that online and wondering about it. Oh, thank you, Ghibli. I apologize for mispronouncing it. Thank you for correcting me. So embarrassing. But I'm glad you corrected me. Okay. So, just one simple thing we can do, which is to make a choice. Are we going to ask for imitations without the person's consent? It's one thing to ask for an imitation of Shakespeare to make a little funny poem, right? But a living artist who is affected by this and where people might not know the difference, that's a very different thing. So on a related note, a chatbot might not even mention that artist or that writer or the person who came up with whatever they're giving us. And that's kind of how they're designed. So they produce texts without, a large language model, a chatbot that a chatbot is based on is, it's a set of numbers. It's a set of equations. It isn't actually, it doesn't actually know why it's giving us each word it gives us. So they can't always give credit to all the texts they were trained on that may have influenced any given output. But there are ways that they could do better. So here's an example that I think Maha Bali and she's a wonderful faculty educator at the American University of Cairo, that she and I kind of explored together. So when you ask, and she was the first to start experimenting with this and noticing that I'm aware of, and noticing that sometimes these chatbots would describe a concept and not say who came up with it, even when that was important. So one example we explored was like, if you ask about nonviolent resistance, it gave us a definition in this case. This is a ChatGPT screenshot. And the definition was devoid of any human or social context. But she and I both felt that to understand what that term means, you need to know that it originated with Gandhi, with Martin Luther King Jr. and Thoreau, that they were all involved in discussions about what that meant, and they had different perspectives and came from different places and contexts, and had different effectiveness in doing it. And those people are important to understanding that concept. So as users of chatbots, we can push those chatbots to give more credit. They might not do a perfect job, but we can push them to we can ask the question, who came up with that concept? What's the context for it? And that's something we can model for students, because we're already teaching them about citing sources as a key information literacy skill. And if we just kind of let AI get away with not doing that, we're undermining that whole project. So let's look at this in an example with teaching assistants. And I wanted to show you this with one particular AI teaching assistance app that you might or might not be aware of. I think it's a reduced harm way of building AI literacy if you're relatively new to AI, Conmigo teacher tools, but it still has these issues, as you'll see. So, and I did a previous webinar where I went into more detail about just a tour of this, and I've put the link to those, I'll put the link to those slides in the chat. For the tour of Conmigo teacher tools. It's in Canvas now for all California community college teachers. Your institution can enable it in Canvas, and that's free. And then it will be in your Canvas navigation, but you don't even need that. You can just go to this link. Any teacher can use it for free on the Khan Academy website. And so this is not aimed at students. It's not tutoring. It's not grading or feedback. It's just for us, for teaching assistants. So it just gives you a whole bunch of ideas on how you might use AI to support things like quiz questions, rubrics, lesson plan ideas, discussion prompts. Those are some that I've used. And so we'll see, if you start doing this, you'll see that sometimes it doesn't give credit, as I described. For example, it has this function called a couple of functions actually, that basically rewrite texts for you. So if you have an academic paper that's difficult and you want to share an easier version or bullet points from it, it will just rewrite it for you and give you this new version. And often that new version won't even mention the author or the publication. And it kind of erases the human source of that piece of writing, potentially, if we're not careful. And maybe the app could do a better job of getting it to do that. But if the app doesn't, we can. So I thought it would be nice if people at this point, since I've been talking a lot, want to just try this really briefly. We could just take maybe 5 minutes, and I can show it, or you can just do it on your own. But again, if you want to try you can try Conmigo Teacher Tools, or you can use any chatbot that you already use, or you want to try a new one from the slides. These are the main ones that I use. And think of a concept that you feel like should be attributed to a person, where you kind of need to know who's behind it. Maybe there's an acronym for it. Maybe it's a phrasing that they came up with, or a seminal concept in your field. Where, if you're going to learn a little about this, you should know the human context for it, or the human origin. Yeah, and as Diane is saying in the chat, so what we can do is, if it doesn't tell us automatically, we can ask it to cite the response. And I like that also. Tell us if it doesn't know. So it might not cite reliably, but at least that would give us a clue, and we could follow up and see if that really is the source. So try it out. If you're doing it on Conmigo Teacher Tools, you might go to the Refresh My Knowledge option. Maybe I'll just show that. And sometimes it might give that, 1 second. So this is my Conmigo Teacher Tools in action. I was working on a rubric, but if I go back to the landing page, seems to have logged me out. Sorry about that. Let me reload. So it has a refresh my knowledge button that, so I could ask it there, tell me about nonviolent resistance. And then I could, as Diane said, I could push it if it doesn't tell me who came up with it. That's interesting. So yeah, Diane says when you add the cite you ask it to cite its sources, it's been giving you 2 options and asking which is appropriate. Conmigo is only giving me videos. That's interesting. Well, for some reason my Conmigo is not loading, so apologize for that. Maybe we'll come back to the Conmigo, since the focus is the ethical issues, but we can cycle back, and I could maybe troubleshoot at the end with people to get that working and show you how to do that. So, but I'm curious if anybody just tried that, and if it did give you the source or not. Feel free to share in the chat or comment on the slides. So yeah, if Conmigo doesn't work, you could just go to gemini.google.com. Okay, so yeah, so in this case that Gregory Bayer, sorry, I'm gonna not try to pronounce names because I don't know. But he did find that it cited Joseph Campbell for the hero's journey. Very interesting. So I love that Google, Meg Phelps is saying in the chat that she tried Gemini, and it actually has a big caveat that it doesn't cite in the traditional sense, that its responses are based on patterns and relationships it's learned from its massive data set. I think that's it's good that they're providing that caveat. But it's also true that we can try to trace the context or the origin of a particular idea, and sometimes there will be a historical figure who really is known and for having developed something. And so sometimes we can find that out, and the chatbot can help us. And I'll show a little bit more about that in the next section, actually, about how to get it to help us find those kinds of sources. Okay, so people are finding so far that it has cited sources. That's good to hear. That's interesting. So but we'll find inconsistencies like um, Alana in the chat is saying that Perplexity mentioned the American Library Association, but didn't use that as a source, or so didn't link to it. So we just have to be really skeptical of how they deal with sources, because they are not following the same cognitive processes or ethical processes that we use around citing sources. So that sort of constant skepticism and like curiosity about those little discrepancies, I think is really useful. And sharing that with students, communicating that with students. Um, Great. People are finding that it does mention Karl Marx, but maybe doesn't mention a source. I believe that we are going to save the chat and share that. Is that right? Yeah, great. Okay. So feel free to keep experimenting and sharing, but I did want to talk about inaccuracy. So I'm sure you've heard that chatbots make things up. Usually that's called hallucinations. I just uh, published a preprint with a co-author where we argue for calling those mirages instead of hallucinations, kind of putting it more on us as the users or the viewers to recognize that whatever the chatbot is giving us is not real. So you feel free to explore that. But the point is that this is a problem that is not going away, even though they can browse now. But actually, a recent study that OpenAI did found that their latest chatbots, the reasoning models, were actually hallucinating more or miraging more. So we have to expect this. And it sometimes is very subtle. It's not always just a made up source. It can be, but there's a concern that it could lead to kind of a casual treatment of truth, a devaluation of truth. If we're constantly seeing these answers that are so plausible, so tailored to what we're asking, it seems right. There's such a temptation just to trust it, and to kind of shrug about, is that really true? And people are asking, how do you know when it's a mirage? Can you ask it if it's making it up? And the tricky thing is that the systems themselves, they don't really have well, let me say, on some level, they don't know if they're making it up or not, because fundamentally they're predicting next words. Like, what would a human say next is kind of the basic question that a chatbot is answering based on all the patterns and all the text it's seen. What kind of text might come next? And that's a question that's not about what's true, right? So on some level, they don't know if they're making it up or not. It might happen to be true, it might not. We are the ones who really can know that. It might tell you that it made it up, but that might not even be true, right? So, um, we can't trust it to give us that answer about truth, and and we have to use all of our information literacy skills um, to try to find that out, right? And so sharing that process with students, sharing examples where it has made something up or where we have found that it was wrong, I think is really powerful, just to create that expectation that, you know, we got to watch out for this. Um, so it's true that we can reduce hallucinations, and I'll show you an example of that. We can reduce it. We can even now ask the systems to browse and try to verify what they have told us. But it's not perfect. I think even the people who are really excited about AI, like Wharton Business School professor Ethan Mollick, will constantly point out ways that even the most advanced systems are still making things up in subtle ways, or getting data wrong, or summarizing something wrong, even if it's from a real source. And those are some of the subtle ways that I have seen even the Conmigo teacher tools make things up. So, I asked it to give a version for fourth graders of a New York Times opinion piece, and it missed the main point of the article. It did summarize some of the points. It was kind of in the ballpark, right? And that's a subtle form of kind of, it didn't really know, it didn't really get it. And another example was it didn't have current answers when I asked it about chatbot capabilities. It gave me an old version of it talked about an old version of Google's chatbot. And then when I asked it about something really specific, like my son's preschool's policy on English and Spanish use, it just made something up that wasn't true. So let's see. So one thing that people are trying, one thing we can do is that skepticism and sharing with students moments when we've caught it making things up, and just kind of laughing at that and showing that that's to be expected. We got to watch for it. But this is something really new that now that these chatbots can browse, and this is pretty new development that, like, for example, Claude couldn't browse the internet until very recently. I think even ChatGPT free version browses the internet now. And Gemini, Copilot, they can all follow links and pull information from live websites. So there's some we could ask them to fact check, right? They're not going to do it perfectly, but they might help us out in that process. And they would be using some real sources. So, right. And as people are noting in the chat, so one example of this that's gotten a lot of press is these deep research modes. And it's confusing because Google has a deep research and ChatGPT has a deep research. And I think maybe Perplexity and Claude are calling it the same thing. But basically, it's like it creates what looks like a research paper, and it will have real sources with real links. And there are fabrications and hallucinations in those, and just sort of misunderstandings or vague language or things that aren't quite right, or they sound like they mean something, but they don't really mean that much when you think about it. There are those kinds of things, even in these most advanced kinds of deep research reports. And there are also things that do end up being true or interesting or useful. So yeah, I invite you to try those out. It is pretty interesting to see what's possible. This is kind of a specialized version of that. Mike Caulfield is the creator of, you might have heard of this SIFT approach to information literacy. It's pretty widely taught in colleges and universities. And he's written a book on verifying information online. And in his Substack, he just shared a big old prompt that anybody can use with a chatbot to ask it to check the accuracy of a claim and to find the context for that claim. So he's hoping that chatbots could actually reduce the labor involved in fact checking. And maybe that could actually help us with our information landscape. He says, let's reduce the amount of energy required to refute BS. So I'm going to invite you to actually try this. I'll show you an example. This is his most recent Substack. Right, and we tell students to double check sources, and most AI apps do say that. And it's important to model that. And if there are ways we can make that more feasible and efficient time-wise, we'll be able to do more of it. So that's kind of what he's doing. So I'm going to invite you to try this. First, I'll just show you maybe one example of what it looks like if this loads correctly. So basically, he's got this really long prompt code in his Substack. And if you, maybe I should just show you that too. Yeah, and I appreciate Bryant DeNaros is mentioning Research Rabbit. There are a lot of apps that draw on real sources for academic purposes and that are worth checking out. So here is what it produced in Claude. When I asked it to fact check this statement, I said, this is something I've wondered about for a long time, because you hear that, if you're exposed to a big change in temperature, you might be more likely to get sick. Or a sudden cold snap can make someone more likely to catch a cold. So you just give it any claim. You can also give it an image or a meme, and give it his prompt, and it produces this kind of fact-checking response. And it also has links, and it also assesses the credibility of those sources that it supposedly used. And it sort of evaluates the correctness of various associated questions about getting sick and temperature. And it tries to expose ideas that are incorrect but commonly held. I found this pretty convincing, and the sources pretty decent. You'll see that it lists the sources, and it is supposed to actually assess them itself. So, and it gives me a summary at the end, which I actually didn't know that, when the nose is colder, we can't fight viruses as effectively. And I did follow the sources up, and they did say that. So I did learn something here, and it helped me to fact check that. So I would love for folks to try that if you want. We'll just take like a couple of minutes because we have, other topics, but let me show you. So this is his Substack, right? And I had to scroll all the way down and then pick up this prompt that he has generously shared. And he has tested this over 1,000 times and tweaked it a million times to get it to perform well. Maybe he'll make an app that does this without us having to copy paste, but it is something available that you can use in any chatbot platform, or that students could use. So you just copy that, and then if you're in a chatbot, you would just paste it into the prompt. So I encourage you to try that, and I might see, did anybody try that and see a result yet? Let me put the instructions back up, and put the Substack back up. So, give it a claim that you have heard that you're not sure about. I think it's more interesting, or you can give it a conspiracy theory and see how well it does too. He says it doesn't do as well in ChatGPT, but I have seen it do just fine. His same prompt in Gemini as well. So I will leave that open, and maybe if you want to share any results, I'm very curious, and I definitely like message with him on social media, and I will share with him if we find anything interesting, or if you want to, you can comment on his Substack too. But I definitely want to make sure we talk about bias, because this is often the top concern that I hear from educators. And you've probably heard that it's trained on all of our data. And so, even though my first thought with AI was, oh, maybe it'll be more objective and neutral, it actually can be worse. So, what did you train the AI on? Oh, biased humans. So guess what it's going to imitate? So sometimes it's even more biased because the bias is a pattern it can pick up on that's sort of easy to follow, unfortunately. So I tested Conmigo teacher tools a few different ways, and I didn't see a lot of obvious bias that was obvious to me very often. But I did see one case in which I asked it to, it has a neat feature that where you can give it a class concept you're going to teach and say, make it relevant and tell it something about what your class is interested in or about their identity, and see if it gives you ideas for connecting that concept to something that interests them, or that they would engage with. But you can see the risk that it might stereotype that identity or that interest in the process. And that is what happened when I told it we were studying supply and demand and the class was predominantly Black. Um, and one of its suggestions was essentially to talk about music or fashion. Um, and it's not like it was suggesting other things that were not stereotypical. There was just that stereotype. And so I just thought, oh, we should be past that. Um, so the other risk is that what if I am biased, and so the way I prompt it is biased, and then its response is even more biased and I don't notice, right? Because I had the bias to begin with. So how can we be vigilant for this, to reduce the impact, right? I mean, um, on one hand, we can raise awareness about it for regulation or pressure on the companies, for frameworks like design justice, and that really take into account um, whose data is being used, whose voice is being heard, and um, with what purpose, and who does the tool serve. Um, we can include those concepts in AI literacy and include them when we talk about AI and even daily uses of it. Pointing out how that system was biased. If I tell my students, I don't know if I want to share that example, but I could. Or another example of how AI was biased with them, and just note that they could work on that. The engineers are working on it. I wonder how much money they're putting into that versus other things, reducing bias. Yeah, I think in the chat, Yvonne Ho is saying that text to art generators show the bias really clearly. And in my other slide decks, I have a couple resources. There's a great article on how it stereotypes people from developing countries when it creates images of them. And then I have my students create ask for an image of some identity concept and see if it stereotypes that identity, and if it does so in problematic ways. So teaching about it and looking at systematic solutions is one thing. But just on an individual level, watching for it and actually asking it to correct for bias. That's the other thing that if you take away one practical tip here, it might be, don't assume that what it gives you is all it's capable of. If we don't like it, we got to tell it. And I have to remind myself of that. But, if it gives me something that seems biased or stereotyped, I can tell it, don't don't stereotype. Just very simply, try again and don't stereotype. Give me a more balanced, considered answer that doesn't make assumptions about this group. Um, so we can mitigate the bias in how we prompt. We can try to get it on our side. So a kind of a funny example is that, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if I'm prompting a chatbot and the topic is AI, right? Which for me, it often is, right? It's like, I want a sample argument about AI that my students are going to analyze or something. Or in this case, I just tried the prompt, write an analysis of current research on the impact of student engagement with AI on learning. And I find that the AI outputs are much more positive about AI than my prompts would suggest. Um, so they're not just trying to please me and what I'm expecting, they are emphasizing the positive about AI. And so ChatGPT's the section heading sounded like marketing. We're like, oh, AI is great for student engagement for learning. And it's not that those things are not, there's a point to each of those things. Personalization, critical thinking, maybe it could do those things. But it barely even mentioned a concern that students would use AI to skip learning, right? Um, Actually, I think it didn't even mention that. It mentioned challenges and ethical considerations, but it didn't mention cheating. It's like, um, that's not a complete analysis. Um, so yeah, I think I appreciate the comment in the chat about looking for variation in and not assuming one output is always what it would represents what it actually a stable position that it's taking. Sometimes it corrects itself. I often ask it for 3 answers just to compare them and pick the one I like the best. So in this example, when it gave me this very pro AI report on AI and learning, um, I asked it not to. I said, that analysis seems biased and smacks of AI hype. Please write a balanced, considered analysis. Including a clear-eyed examination of ways in which engagement with AI might interfere with learning as well as stimulate it. And you can see the whole chat session if you like, but it did give me a less biased report, but it was still emphasizing the positive in more subtle ways than before. So I felt like that attempt did not eradicate the bias, but it helped. So another approach that I'm less familiar with, but I have started to experiment with is to, it's less common, but there are people who are trying to build less biased or unbiased chatbots. And one example is Latimer, which was trained on, they say, built to more accurately reflect the experience, culture, and history of Black and Brown people. And I don't know the details of that training process, but you can just use it for free, try it for free, and compare its outputs with other chatbots. I did that. I didn't see any big differences in the few experiments I've done, but I imagine on some topics it might be quite different. So we can explore other kinds of AI that are actually made by people who are focused on the problem of bias. Um, so, oh, because I have that twice, sorry. So I wanted to do an experiment, but I'm worried we won't get through and have time for questions. So maybe we won't do this experiment, but on your own, you might try asking a chatbot for examples of a course concept. This is something that it is useful for, quiz questions, more examples, ask the class, what topic do you want? But does it stereotype as it does that? Is there something that's subtly condescending or that perpetuates a stereotype in the example it comes up with? As you're trying to make it engaging, as you're trying to make it relatable, we could look out for that. Okay. Thanks for trying it. Yeah. So just quickly on these other topics, privacy and data rights, we can model just asking about privacy and checking the policies of any AI system that we are using. And we can mention that to students, right? And we can mention that we don't share sensitive information with a chatbot. And we don't share other people's information with a chatbot without their permission. So we can also show, if you go to ChatGPT settings, you can change the default settings so that it doesn't use your data to train future AI systems, or at least they pledge that they won't if you turn off that default setting. You know, I think it's important to offer students alternatives to using AI if we are inviting them to use it. We might consider using apps that are vetted by our IT departments for data privacy, and they know how to check for that, right? And so they checked, for example, my essay feedback is an app that I'm using, and they went through a rigorous process before they let us integrate that with Canvas. Many institutions have a co-pilot access to that chatbot through your Microsoft account, and that is more privacy protected than a personal chatbot. So these are all things that we can mention, throw in the process of anytime AI comes up. If we're doing these things or inviting students, that can be part of the discussion, these privacy considerations. For example, with Conmigo teacher tools, if you go to the privacy page, it does say that it cautions you not to use personally identifiable information, but it also says they won't sell the data or use it to train AI models. So, ways this comes up in teaching assistants. I've been tempted, when I was sort of brainstorming ideas for a recommendation letter, and I had the thought, oh, student wrote this questionnaire at the beginning, all these answers about their background. Maybe I should give that as context to an AI and come up with a recommendation letter. And then I thought, wait, that's their writing. They wrote these long responses, and I don't have permission to put that into a chatbot to give it to one of these companies. So I didn't do that. But maybe instead, something I have done is to talk out my rough thoughts as a brainstorm and then give a transcript to a chatbot. There are a lot of apps that will just give you a transcript. Otter AI is one. You can actually use Zoom for this. And then you have this rough transcript, and you might say to the chatbot, what are some main points I made? Give me the bullet points. And that sort of helps reflect back my thinking to me in a way that reduces my cognitive load of dealing with that transcript. But I'm not giving it the student's work, and maybe I don't use that text necessarily, but it helps me. Let's see. So quickly, I will say there's not a lot that we can do directly about these labor practices that I mentioned. Human labor, there was an expose in Time in 2023 that OpenAI had used Kenyan workers, paying them less than $2 an hour and exposing them to a lot of really traumatic images and disturbing images that really affected their mental health without enough support or opt-out options. So, we should recognize in our discussion of AI that this is based on human labor, and not just the text and the images that it was trained on, but also data workers who are often in developing countries who are annotating the text and helping to train these models. And there are a lot of concerns about how they're treated. And I have links here on these screenshots. And there have been some organizing efforts. So there's a group called Turkopticon of Amazon's Mechanical Turk workers that is trying to organize for better working conditions for them. So I think, again, this is part of AI literacy, understanding these systems, how they are built, the ethical concerns around how they're built and how people are seeking to address those concerns. And the sense that we could be part of that discussion and our students can be part of it is important. And add any other ideas you have on addressing any of these concerns. And I think this is my final concern, which some of you have touched on in the chat, but just the erosion of trust due to dishonest or non-transparent use of AI, passing off AI outputs as human could be seen as a kind of fraud. And I feel that it is, but I also acknowledge there are a lot of gray areas where it's not common practice to disclose that we've used it, or we might legitimately feel that it's not necessary in some situations. But as teachers, I would just observe that, most AI policies ask students to disclose if, when, and how they're using AI. And so, it's true that we're different from students. It's not about our learning, so maybe it's not as important that we disclose on one level, but on another level, I think there's a widespread sense that it seems hypocritical if teachers are using it and not saying it, and students are supposed to say if they use it. So I think overall, to mitigate that concern, we can just model transparency. And I think that helps build trust. It helps students see that we're aware of AI, that we're trying to be conscientious, that, maybe when we don't say we used it, we really didn't. And maybe that leads to more open conversations with our students that are less, punitively oriented about when is it appropriate, when is it not. And so we can model that. So that's something that I do, if I frequently will come up with a worksheet or an in-class activity where I've used AI to help come up with, say, examples or ideas even for the lesson. And I will say at the bottom, I'll have a little AI use statement. And this is a sample from my AI orientation for students, where I tell them that I asked for feedback, but I didn't include AI generated text except in one place. And I tell them where that is. And I'll even include a link to the chat transcript, because that might be an AI literacy moment for them when they see, oh, how did my teacher use it? So I think that's a simple thing we can do. So we don't really have time for breakout groups, sadly, but I will just leave these questions up. And maybe let's see what questions you have. I may have missed things in the chat. Feel free to put them back in. Anything that I didn't address or something that you want to disagree with me on. Very open to that, please. I don't have the last word on any of these topics. So I do want to save the chat. Any questions or comments or other additional approaches that you want to share? Yes, I can resend slides. Let me go to that. Oh, so this is the link to today's slides, and do feel free to comment and share those as well. They're open licensed. And then if you want, these are links to other resources that I share. So there's an AI orientation for students, which is OER, a big long Google Doc that they can comment on. You can adapt parts of it if you want. And then here are sort of my slide decks on other presentations I give on academic integrity and AI, on using AI to support learning goals with students, AI research assistance in academic contexts, and AI writing feedback. So those are all the things I like to explore. Share the Chancellor's Office Humans Framework. Wonderful. Yeah, if you haven't a link to that, feel free to share it. Great. And just to note that what's coming up. I do have one more workshop where I'm going to go more in depth and have us experiment more with sort of more advanced additional approaches to AI assistance with course materials. So working with files, working with browsing, um, and working with different platforms beyond the Conmigo, working with custom bots. So I hope you'll join me for that Thursday, May 1st at 10 a.m. And you can also go back to there's a recording and slides for my previous presentation that kind of gave a tour of Conmigo teacher tools. And there's Anwar is putting a link to the whole webinar series in the chat. So that's wonderful. And we have a few minutes. So any other questions, concerns? Maybe very curious what, if anything, you'd want to talk about before we wrap up. Thank you. People have been so engaged in the chat and so many good points. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being kind, because this is such a tough issue, and there's so many passionate feelings about it. People get feelings hurt, very angry at each other. It can be very polarizing, you know, the anti-AI and pro-AI. And so I just really appreciate you as a group staying really positive in the chat. And trying to, you know, just let's be open and learn from each other. And most educators are somewhere, have some ambivalence and some concern about AI ethics. And so we can help each other through that. And yeah, thank you, everyone.
So Anna, I can probably do a few announcements, and then if people have some questions, they can type them in the chat. Thank
Great.
you so much, Anna. That was so amazing. I learned so much. I wrote some notes down. Like you mentioned, this is such a broad topic, and I want to thank also the audience, because everyone was very kind. And this is a very, you know, AI is not easy. We're all dealing with it as faculty. So thank you everyone for attending. But before you go, please go ahead and complete the survey if you haven't already. We put the link in the chat. I'll go ahead and drop it in again. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to support@cbc.edu. We also encourage you to attend our last webinar for the semester that Anna Mills will also be doing on May 1st. And we'll also drop the link for all our previous webinars if you're interested in watching the recordings. The recordings of this webinar shall be posted within a week or so be patient with us. And yeah, I think that's it for today. Thank you all, everyone. We'll hang around if anyone has questions, and have a wonderful day.
Someone was if anyone wants me to show them how to get into Conmigo or troubleshoot that, I could do that. I don't know if that person's still here, but yes, okay, let me try that. I'm sure, well, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I can at least show what that looks like for me really quickly. So so if you go to Khan Academy, they have a lot of different kinds of things at Khan Academy, including tutoring, student-facing stuff, as you probably know. But they also have teacher resources, and that's a very separate, discrete thing. Doesn't seem to be loading, so sorry about that. Here we go. Looks like I'm logged in. So you want to just create an account. If you don't have an account, you create a teacher account. And when you log in, you'll see this Conmigo, and you can click it and go to teacher tools. I think it's loading. Oh, I'm already there. And then you should see these all these options for types of AI assistance with teaching materials mostly. You can star the ones that are interesting to you if some are not relevant, and then you can just see the starred ones. Um, and the thing I didn't realize in there, little tip, is just that once you generate, once you fill out the little form to get something, oh, it probably wants me to tell what level. I'll just do something random. You can ask it, you can push it, you can ask it to revise, or you can ask it questions about something. And there's a little chat pane over here on the side, on the right. So you can open that up and you can request it to change the style, the level of detail. You can ask questions, or you can highlight things in, you know, if you highlight something, it comes up with these little tool options. So you can ask it to make changes or just give you something different, or you can chat about it. So I might say, yeah, give me more detail. Add specific examples of material. Like, so it's giving me, I can tell it anything. Make this less boring. That's not really less boring, but it tried. Yeah, so that's my quick tour of Conmigo. Let's see.
Thank you so much. I know we want to respect your time, Anna, and everyone else's time. So if you want to hang around for another minute, you're of course welcome to, but we really, really appreciate all your time. I know talking for 90 minutes isn't easy. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate everyone. Good energy.
Yeah. Have a great day, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.